Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're going to be doing another episode of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights. This will be part 68, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and compare them to their real-life fossil counterparts. So today, we haven't got so many in terms of fish. We've only got one fish to start off with, but we've still got all sorts of wonderful species to talk about today. And let's get stuck into today. So first we're going to be starting off with the white bass by Leaf and Buffsu, the dream team when it comes to fishies. It's a really wonderful fish here. So we got the white bass, also known as the silver bass or the sand bass. These guys are a freshwater fish from the temperate bass family Monoridae, and they're commonly found around, and commonly have this like silver white color to pale green, where they kind of get their name. And they have these narrow stripes along with these rough scales that kind of give them their distinct look. And they are widely distributed across North America, and that includes large reservoirs and rivers. And when mating in the spring, they're most often found in shallow rivers, creeks, and streams. And they've been introduced to some places as sports fish, and also predate on nuisance fish such as gizzard shad, and they are the state fish of Oklahoma. So as I mentioned, they're widely distributed across the United States. Particularly they're found in the Midwest, so they'll be very abundant in Pennsylvania, also Arkansas, South Dakota, Wisconsin, and Oklahoma. And they have been found in the Mississippi, but they've been introduced to many different waters across the United States. And also been successfully introduced into Manitoba as well, where they become a sport fish. So in terms of size, most of the time these guys grow between 10 to 12 inches or 25 to 30 centimeters, but they can reach up to 17 inches or 43 centimeters or more. And the record size for one of these guys was caught at about 6 pounds 13 ounces, or about 3.1 kilograms, which was caught by a fish in Oregon, Orange Lake County, Virginia in 2010, and 1989 actually. And then there was another large specimen that got about that size to an Annamite River in Louisiana. So it seems like there's at least two records of some really large specimens of these guys, so it's pretty cool. So in terms of their diet, these guys are carnivores, so they typically feed on whatever they can. They feed on Lepidoptera, copepods, any sort of small kind of small invertebrates, but they also feed on like minnows and worms, and only the larger fish will feed on other fish. And as they summer season progresses, they'll often eat fewer fish, and they are able to accumulate lipids over the summer, lipids, which is fats, to better survive the cool winter. And in terms of the habitats, they're typically found in high densities in upstream segments of river, and the portion of river becomes the most degraded, so a number of different kinds of fish live in this segment as well. And in terms of reproduction, they tend to spawn about mid-March to late May, and the optimum water temperature is about 12 to 20 degrees, 54 to 68 degrees, and they are known to find their home spawning ground even if they move to a different part of the same lake. And they spawn during the daytime or daylight, and females will release between 242,000 and 933,000 eggs, which stick onto the surface of objects, while the eggs are laid in a clear, relatively shallow water plants. With plants, mud logs, gravel and stuff, they stick to that pretty easily. The parents will then move on to deeper water and do not take care of the young, and the young fish will live in the shallow water until it's time to move to deeper waters. And when they're trying to find a female with whom to mate with, males will actually bump against a female's abdominal area. So that means the female will rise closer to the surface and begin spinning and releasing her eggs. With several males that have stayed within the area will fertilize her eggs. So even though she's laid so many eggs, so many males will be able to fertilize some of her eggs as well, which is pretty interesting. Really, really cool fish. I think it came out rather well. Wonderful guy here. Let's just see some white bass. Bart the white bass. I like that. So again, that was done by Leaf and Buffsu. Did a wonderful job. And next we got a mod from Ginger Toast and Leaf, which is really, really cool. We have got a little terrapin this time. We got the European pond turtle, or the European pond terrapin. Such a cute little guy. Look at him. So these guys are a species of long-lived freshwater turtle, and they're endemic to the western Palearctic. So they're really only found in Europe. These guys are found across South and Central Europe, West Asia, and North Africa as well. and in France, where there's 6 large remaining populations which are all deteriorating and the most endangered reptile in the country. So in Switzerland, the Europe pond turtle was extinct at the beginning of the 20th century and has since been reintroduced since 2010. And in the early post-glacial period, the European pond turtle had a much wider range than it does today, and has been found as far north as Sweden and the UK, and where a reintroduction has been proposed by Celtic reptile amphibians to reintroduce them to areas such as Sweden and the UK. And in terms of their habitat, these guys tend to live in wetlands, and typically surrounded by a large proportion of natural wooded landscapes. And they also feed in upland environments, and they're typically considered semi-aquatic, but terrestrial movements can be sporting up to 1 kilometer, 0.62 miles, and occasionally have been seen up to 4 kilometers or 2.5 miles away from water. So in terms of their morphology, they tend to be a medium-sized turtle with a carapace, straight carapace length, so that's that big bit here. Typically gets to about 12 to 38 centimeters or 4.7 to 15 inches long, with this darkish brown with a hint of grey color to it. And their heads are usually spotted with yellow, as long as the pastron is usually quite yellowish, which we don't really see here, but that's cool regardless. An important factor that also affects their development is the temperature and thermal conditions. And it has actually been reported that different growth rates in the same species occur, including variation of body size and clutch size, depends on temperatures in certain areas. And due to the evident patterns of sexual dimorphism, adult males of the species always tend to be smaller than the females, and in males, smaller pastron offer a wider mobility compared to females, which can be useful for mounting and things like that. And due to the difference in diet and foraging habits, they may have kind of correlation with the adaptive effect with their skull and head morphology. That means that potentially the males and females may occupy a slightly different niche in the ecosystem. But in terms of the diet, they eat a mix of plants and animals matter, which they can digest effectively. It's actually been reported that the adult diet starts from a carnivorous and progresses to be more herbivorous as they get older, which is similar to other omnivorous turtles. As they become an adult, though, the amount of plant matter consumption increases during the post-breeding period, and they may actually prefer less energetic food after the breeding season, and it's a period where most of their energy is spent recovering from reproduction. And in terms of nesting, most of these guys lay their eggs on land, typically near like a water body. And the search for nesting areas by adult females can take several hours to more than a day. And once the location is established, they spend their time constructing the nest and lay their eggs and closing the nest, which the whole process takes about 4 hours. Nest fidelity is a characteristic that female pond turtles carry out by selecting a nesting site based on its ecological characteristics, and then return to for further expeditions so long as the site has not changed. So if they've laid there before, they'll go there again because they know it's a good place. And they tend to change to another nesting site if there's visual changes to the present environment or because of dietary changes. So if they must change their nest, they will try to select a site that's in close proximity to that. But in adult females, they can also lay in other abandoned nest sites if conditions change to better suit the egg's survival. So that's pretty interesting. They're quite generous in that regard. Females actually do not exhibit nest fidelity and lay eggs in the same period for a long time, though, even with ecological changes, and may produce large proportions of males as vegetation grows and nesting areas become more shaded. And since, like a lot of species, these guys are temperature determinant, so the sexes, a change in temperature generally can cause a larger amount of males or females, which can upset that sex ratio. So in terms of mortality, climate has actually had an effect on these guys. Since hatchlings only are able to survive under favorable weather conditions, but due to regular annual clutch size of long lives, these guys tend to balance it out. So they die a lot as babies, but if the adult survives, that makes lots of babies, so it cancels each other out. And they've actually become rare in most countries, even though they're widely distributed across Europe, sadly. It's mainly because of cars and driving. They get on roads, and then obviously they get run over by cars, which sucks. And they often carry complex challenges for these populations of fragmentum, so that means they are kind of inbred over time. Another big issue as well is exotic species, such as the red-eared slider is another big issue since it's a common pet turtle, and they can outcompete these guys, especially in some parts of Europe. But generally, they're generally larger and heavier than the native European pond turtles, so they get outcompeted. But the usual lifespan for these guys as well is generally about 40 to 60 years, and can live over 100 years, but that's pretty rare. And yeah, they have been maintained as pets, however it's been restricted due to protective laws, and ownerships of wild specimens can be prohibited, so you can only get licensed captive bred specimens without being illegal. And due to this impact, the European pond turtle has been found to be relocated to areas distinct from origin. However, it is possible to localize and indicate a region of origin with genetic testing. So there's been a lot of movement to reintroduce animals into areas where they're probably safer. So that's pretty cool, and I think these guys are really cool as well. Ginger Toast and Leaf, you did a wonderful job. Next we got Bird. We've got mod by Leaf and Bongo Hardwood who helped out with that. So we got the Egyptian Goose. So wonderful guys here. So these guys are a member of the duck family and a native to Africa, southern Sahara and the Nile Valley. And these guys were considered sacred by the ancient Egyptians and appeared in much of their artwork as well. And because their high popularity, they have established feral populations in Western Europe, the United States, and New Zealand. So in terms of the description, they typically swim well and they look heavy, even though they more look like a goose than a duck, really. Hence the name, so the Egyptian goose rather than a duck. They get about 63 to 73 centimeters, or 25 to 29 inches long. And the sexes, they're pretty much identical in plumage, but the males are average, a little bit slightly larger, with some variation with plumage, so some birds can be grey or browner, so it just depends on the genes. And a large part of the wings of mature birds is white, but it's hidden by the coverts. And when aroused, they often, or either in alarm or aggression, so when they're like angry, the white begins to show on their wings, and in flight, the wings are fully spread, you can quite see that white. And these guys, in terms of differences between the sexes, they actually have different calls. The males have like the subdued duck-like quack, which is seldom sounds unless it's aroused, and then that's what the male has. And the male also attracts a mate with a noisy display that includes honking and neck stretching and displays. And the females have like a raspy, noisier quack that sounds frequently used to aggression, and they also insistently the sinus disturbance of when anyone's messing with the young, so they don't like that. As I mentioned, these guys freely breed across Africa, except in dense deserts and forests, and where they are locally abundant. So they can be found in the Nile Valley in south of Sahara, and they can be found in the Sahel and places like that. They've also spread to Great Britain, Denmark, the Netherlands, Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, where there's self-sustaining populations that have mostly been descended from ornamental birds that escaped. And escapes have been seen on occasion in places such as Texas, Florida, California, and New Zealand. And in terms of behavior, these guys are largely terrestrial, but they will perch readily in trees and such. And in terms of their diet, they typically eat seeds and things. We'll have a look at the babies. They typically eat seeds, leaves, grasses, and plant stems. And then occasionally they will eat locust worms and other small animals. And until the goslings, as you can see here, are a few weeks old and strong enough to graze, they typically feed on small aquatic invertebrates, especially freshwater plankton. And if anoxic conditions lead to botulism that gets passed off the food chain that can affect these guys, and the entire clutches of goslings may be killed by this botulism, which is very, very bad. And both sexes are actually very territorial towards their own species and when breeding. And they will actually attack them in like these kind of dogfights. And they've actually been observed attacking aerial objects such as drones, and as they enter this habitat as well to protect them, which is very interesting. And they actually will nest in a large variety of situations, especially in holes or in mature trees and parklands, where the female will build their nest out of leaves, grass, and both parents will actually take turns incubating their eggs. Egyptian geese usually pair for life, with both the male and female taking care of the offspring until they're old enough to take care of themselves. And such parental care, however, does not include foraging for the young, because the babies are precocial. That means they're able to run around and take care of themselves pretty much. And in the native range, a lot of these predators that eat these guys include leopards, lions, cheetahs, hyenas, crocodiles, and old world vultures. So yeah, really cool guys here. Big fan of Leaf and Bongo Hardwood making another wonderful bird for us. We all know I'm a big bird fan. Next, we've got good old Crocodile, done by a new guy that's coming to the scene. Ein Bobo, I believe that's you say that. But we have got the Morlet's Crocodile, also known as the Mexican Crocodile. Pretty cool guy, if I do say so myself. So these guys are also known as the Mexican Crocodile, and they're a modest-sized crocodilian only found in Mexico, Belize, and Guatemala. And they get quite big. They usually grow about 3 meters long or 10 feet long, which is not huge for things like saltwater crocodiles, but huge for a lot of crocs. And they are considered least concerned with the fossil record in Guatemala. So these guys, in terms of their relatedness, they're closely related to the Cuban koala. That's actually not crocodile, not koala. The Cuban crocodile, and that's where they kind of got like common species. And yeah, they actually believe that the genus these guys originated in Africa and then moved into the Americas, which is pretty interesting. And in terms of the characteristics, they have this very broad snout, as you see here, with about 66 to 68 teeth that they get when they're fully mature. And they have these dark greyish colours with like dark bands and spots along their body and tail. And they're quite similar to other crocodiles, like the American crocodile, but they're somewhat darker as well. And juveniles are usually bright yellow with these bands, as you can kind of see here. Have a look at it. You can see these kind of bands on him. We'll have a look at him later. But yeah, the hind feet of these guys are webbed, and they're quite fast runners because of their strong muscles. And in terms of size, they're smaller compared to most other crocodilians, with males being larger than the females. The average adult is about 2.1 meters, or 6 feet 11 inches, with a typical range of 1.5 to 2.7 meters, or 4 foot 11 to 8 feet 10. Which is generally about that size. The large adults have been reported to get 10 feet long or 3 meters, which is considered rare, but there have been some kind of suggestions of them getting between up to 4.5 meters or 14 feet 9 inches, which is outdated. And body mass is typically for these guys is between 68 to 113 kilograms, 150 to 249 pounds. But however, this may include potentially overweight captive specimens, and they think that a large one could potentially get about 150 kilograms or 330 pounds. It's pretty interesting. So as mentioned, in terms of their habitat, they can be found in Central America, along the Gulf of Mexico, in Belize, Guatemala, and Mexico, and the pine forests as well. And they live in these freshwater ecosystems, also brackish waters and grassy savannas on the Yucatan Peninsula, with juvenile crocodiles living in very dense cover to protect themselves from other predators. And then they might be in that area and remain there until they're old enough to fend for themselves. So they've actually been introduced to the Rio Grande, which is the Rio Bravo of Mexico, with several outlets talking about these guys inhabiting the river, appearing not to be the American alligator, which is native to Texas. But the Morlet's crocodile is native to the Tampuliles and San Fernando southward, and they've been found in cities in kind of these areas in near Orlando. So I believe they've been found in kind of northern parts of Mexico. So in terms of their diet, like most crocodilians, they're pretty generalistic, so they feed on anything they can get their mouths around. Young babies will feed on fish and insects, but as they get bigger and bigger, they'll eat things like small mammals, birds, reptiles, also gastropods, and things like that. And they've actually been reported to take on prey such as dogs and goats, and even English sheepdogs. There have been reports of them. And they've also been known to kill jaguars and adult tapirs, and also like adult cattle, so that's some of the things they know. And they've also been reported to be cannibalistic to each other, so they will eat each other. And as we talk about the babies, we'll move to the babies and talk about their reproduction, with how cute they are. So breeding usually takes place for these guys between April and June, and the eggs are laid before the start of the raining season, with the Morlet's crocodile being unique amongst North American crocodiles, as they build mound nests only, but not mound and hole nests. So the mound nest is about 3 meters or 10 feet wide and about 1 meter high, and can be found near water or on floating vegetation. But the female laying about 20 to 45 eggs, and nests have been found containing eggs from more than one female. But these eggs are buried and the nests are guarded by the female, which usually hatch after 80 days of incubation. And the hatchlings, when they're born, are generally about 17 centimeters or 6.5 inches long. And as the eggs are hatched, the female crocodiles will carry her young into the water, where they're protected by both the parents, including father crocodiles as well. which have been, obviously, if they are disturbed, they'll get quite aggressive to protect them. And in captivity, juvenile crocodiles are treated aggressively by adult crocodiles, but never hatchlings, so all crocodiles kind of care about the little babies, but once you get big enough to fend for yourself, it's all over. But in terms of their conservation, they're considered least concern, but they have always been threatened by habitat destruction and illegal hunting, since both these factors mainly really lowered their populations during the 1940s and 50s because of high-quality leather. But these guys seem to be doing quite well now, since they're quite wonderful little guys, least concern. As long as there's not too much going on in terms of destroying the habitats they live in, they should be doing okay. Here's Daddy Mummy Croco, so she looks cool. Really wonderful job seeing these guys in the game. Kind of an underrated crocodile, but still awesome to see. And next, we have got... that one was done by Iron Bobo. We've got here by Leaf and NicholasLionRider, we have got the Rhim Gazelle, or the Rhim Gazelle. So these guys are also known as the slender-horned antelope, or the African sand antelope. Oh, gazelle, I mean. They're a pale-coated gazelle with long, slender horns that are adapted to life in the desert. And they're actually considered an endangered species, and there's believed to be fewer than 2,500 left of the wild. And they're typically found in Algeria, Egypt, and Tunisia and Liberia, and potentially Chad, Mali, Niger, and Sudan. And in terms of the description, they typically grow to a length of about 101 to 116 centimeters, or 46 inches in length. And they're also the palest among the gazelles, and they're well adapted to desert life in many ways. And you can see they're quite a creamy color as well, and their horns, as you can see, is a slight S-shape, with a tail that's about 15 centimeters long, with these kind of like blackish tip, which is pretty cool. As I mentioned, they're kind of found Algeria, Tunisia, Liberia, and Egypt, and they've been reported in some of their areas, but it seems to be doubtful. They've actually been found in isolated pockets in the central Sahara Desert, with the extreme heat of this environment limiting them to only go out in early mornings and evenings, where they might get most of their moisture or their water from their food. Really nice, wonderful male. We'll have a look at the ones here. And though they do not have a set migratory pattern, they kind of just move around and find food where they can. So in terms of their physiological adaptations, they actually have a special type of temperature regulation called heterothermy that allows them to survive the harsh desert climate. So what happens is the animals will no longer keep their body in a narrow range of body temperatures. So that allows them to increase their body temperature during the heat of the day. That reduces the evaporative cooling of the gazelles that they need to keep cool down. So basically they let their bodies run hot so they can stop sweating or stop their body from trying to cool themselves down. And by reducing that, they actually reduce the energy expenditure and they conserve water. So during the cooler times at night, the stored heat can also be released. That allows the gazelles to allow their body temperature to decrease during this time. And they typically maintain a normal skin temperature of about 35 degrees Celsius in the summer and about 25 degrees in the winter. And with heterothermy, that allows them to have a body temperature increase of 5 to 20 degrees Celsius, depending on the conditions of the season. And these guys were considered endangered by the early 1970s, with these guys in serious decline. They were first hunted and mounted by sports and also for meat and their horns, which were sold as ornaments in the North African markets. And the threats these guys face now is poaching, disturbance by humans, and lots of suitable habitat. And they estimate there may be under like 300, 600 mature individuals in the wild, which is why they're considered endangered. But there's considered to be less, maybe a bit more, about a few thousand or a couple thousand. So that means there's definitely hope for the species. And we'll have a look at a cute little baby while we're on about it. Look at these cute little fellows. Don't you think they're adorable? I think they're adorable. Really did a wonderful job with these guys. So that's the Rhim Gazelle. Next, we've got the next one's done by Nora. A very, very cool mod here. We've got the Desert Bighorn sheep. Wonderful guys here. Let's have a look at the big male. So these guys are a subspecies of your bighorn sheep. So this is Ovis canadensis nelsoni. And these guys are native to the United States and the intermountain west and southwestern regions. Also to Mexico as well. And they are considered quite sensitive to extinction, sadly. And their distribution includes the Mojave Desert, the Sonoran Desert, the Great Basin Desert and the Chihuahuan Desert, or I believe it's that, as well as like a lot of national parks within an area such as the Colorado Plateau, the Mojave National Park, and things like that. And like a lot of other species, the populations of these desert bighorns declined drastically with Europeans kind of expanding into the American Southwest at the beginning of the 16th century. And these declines were followed by a period of population stabilization by conservation methods. And as 2004, they kind of remained really, really low. And but the trend of population has increased since the 1960s. So these guys have been doing quite well. So that's always a good sign. In terms of characteristics, as you can see here, they're quite heavy and stocky sheep. They get similar in size to mule deer, and their weight of mature rams, as you can see here, is about 115 to 280 pounds, so about 52 to 127 kilograms, with ewes, as you can see here, being somewhat smaller, as you can see over here. We'll have a look at the ewes. Due to their unique concave elastic hooves, bighorns are actually really able to climb like steep rocky terrain in the desert mountains quite efficiently, and they rely on their keen sight to detect potential predators such as mountain lions, coyotes, and bobcats, and they use this ability to escape. So we'll have a look at the babies. So both sexes tend to develop horns soon after birth, and this horn will grow more or less throughout its life. Older rams tend to have these curlings of about 3 feet long or so, and more than 1 foot at circumference at the base, with the ewe's horns being much smaller. And after 8 years of growth, the horns of an adult ram, as you can see back there, getting weigh more than 30 pounds, and the annual growth actually indicates the animal's age. And the rams may actually rub their horns to improve their field of view, and both rams and ewes will use their horns to break over cactuses, which they consume. They'll also fight with them as well. And in terms of desert bighorns' lifespans, they typically live for 10 to 20 years, and their typical diet tends to be mainly grasses, but when these grasses are unavailable, they'll eat cacti, sedges, and forbs, things like that. And look at the male while he's sleeping. Great example. So these guys are really well adapted to, similar to the Rhim gazelle, they're actually pretty well adapted to the desert, and they're actually able to let their internal body temperature fluctuate a little bit as well. And they're also adapted because there's very little water, so being able to store this and release heat later allows them to better conserve water. And they actually seem to lose 30% of their body weight and can survive. And after drinking water, they typically recover from these conditions. And there seems to be an adaptive strategy to allow them to survive in the desert, similar to the Rhim's gazelle, which is pretty cool. Or Rhim's gazelle. So these guys are also quite social. They live in herds of about 8 to 10 individuals, and sometimes herds of even 100 or so have been observed. With the rams, they battle to determine the dominant animal, which gains the possession of the ewes, where they're like other bighorn sheep, they'll ram and they charge on each other from distances of up to 20 feet or 6 meters, and they crash together until one of them gets tired. And in terms of breeding, the desert bighorn kind of lives separate from rams and ewes for most of the year, and they gather in the breeding season, which is usually July to October. But breeding may actually occur anytime due to these suitable climatic conditions. And gestation typically lasts about 150 to 180 days, and the lambs are usually born in late winter. So in terms of conservation trends, the number of these guys in prehistoric times are unknown, but it was very likely in the tens of thousands. But during the 1960s, the numbers had dwindled to about 6,700 to 8,100, which was due to excessive hunting, disease and competition from livestock, especially domestic sheep, and lots of other human activities. But there seems to be some really intensive conservation programs where they establish reserves and parks for these guys. And the population from 1960 has grown from about 7,000 to 8,000 to 1993 it was about 19,000, and now the population is estimated to be about 26,000 or even 27,000. So it's a really good conservation effort that shows that they're coming up quite well. And in a lot of places there's been lots of translocations and stuff to try and mix up the genetics as well. And also some places they haven't been doing too well because of predation from mountain lions and stuff, but they seem overall the populations are doing quite well, and really, really nice animals we've got going on here. Really cool bighorns. So Noala, you really did a wonderful job with these bighorn sheep. And now we're going to be moving on to next animal. We've got by Jen and Leaf. We have got the Nile Wildebeest, which we'll talk about in a little bit of detail. So these guys are a subspecies, sometimes considered their own species of wildebeest. These guys are the single species is I don't know how you pronounce the genus name. It's like well, we'll just call them the Nile Wildebeest for the moment. It's got John Stoney. So that's their kind of subspecies or specific name. And these guys are different because they kind of are small body and horns, so a bit smaller than other races. And they're sometimes also referred to as the white banded wildebeest because they have this kind of pale line across their eyes here. And but it seems to be absent in some populations. These guys also have the largest, one of the smallest horns out of any of the groups, which is interesting, and they tend to have and these guys are usually browner. Their gestation period or their reproduction for these guys is about 240 to 255 days with one baby per birth, and they usually are weaned after 4 months, though they may suckle for up to a year. They reach sexual maturity at about 1.5 to 2.5 years in females and 3 years in males, with a lifespan about 20 years. In terms of the rut, they usually rut in March to April, and this time they're quite territorial, especially males. And young are expelled from the herds in August, September, 2 months before calving begins. In terms of behavior, similar to, they don't live in quite a big herds as your normal blue wildebeest. These guys live in herds of about 9 to 20 animals, and they form bachelor groups as well, with their diet predominantly being grasses, so they're primarily grazers. With their predators also including things like Cape hunting dogs, hyenas, cheetahs, crocodiles, leopards, things like that. And these guys are distributed across, this particular subspecies live across Mozambique, Tanzania, and Zambia, with being regionally extinct in Malawi. And they're found north of the Zambezi River in Mozambique, and as far north as southeastern Malawi, which their population is now extinct. And these guys typically live in savanna habitats that's interspread with woodland. And in terms of their population or conservation status, they are considered least concern, with an estimated population of about 88,000 animals, and 2/3 of them are in protected areas. So, really, really cool guy here. So now we're going to be talking about the blue wildebeest, which is the more common version, which is also done by Jen and Leaf, who did a wonderful job with these guys. But first, we'll have a look at the babies. Look at this cute little baby here. Very, very cute. So now we're moving on to the regular blue wildebeest. So these guys, also known as the common wildebeest or the gnu, are one of the two species of wildebeest. But depending who you ask, some of the subspecies are split into different species. Josh and Groves, Gobs and Groves, I believe he say, yep. And these guys, you can see they've got this quite muscular appearance with these long mane here. Really, really nice remake she's done of this as well. And these guys are herbivores. They typically feed on short grasses, and they will form herds of loose aggregations, and they become fast runners and extremely wary. And these guys typically found in Angola, Botswana, Mozambique, Kenya, places like that. These guys, the nominate subspecies, typically lives like South Africa, Namibia, places like that. And there are some evidence of hybrids as well. And in terms of description, you're having a fight. Yeah, you're having a fight. Have a look at one that's not fighting. But these guys are typically larger and darker than the females, or the males are, and they typically get about 170 to 240 or 67 to 94 inches in head to body length, with the average height of this species being about 115 to 145 centimeters tall at the shoulder, or about 45 to 57 inches, with males weighing between 165 to 290 kilograms, or 536 to 639 pounds, and females being a little bit smaller, between 140 and 260 kilograms, or 310 to 570 pounds. And they also have this really interesting characteristic, this really long tail that really makes them look really, really cool, another charismatic feature. And the average lifespan for these guys is about 20 years in the wild and 21 years in captivity, with the oldest individual being about 24 years old. So you can see this coloration, they kind of have this bold appearance. They have these dark stripes on them, really, really interesting. And they also have a large pair of horns, which are shaped like a parentheses. And they kind of extend outwards, with males having quite big ones. They get 33 inches or about 83 centimeters in males, while females have smaller ones. That's about 30 to 40 centimeters or 12 to 16 inches. And in terms of their ecology behavior, they're typically most active during the morning or late afternoon. With the hottest hours of the day, they spend resting. And they typically live in groups of like small aggregations and things like that, with males forming bachelor herds and females forming their own herds with their juveniles, which they join up during the breeding season to breed, where the males will get territorial at about 4 to 5 years of age and become very noisy and then fight each other for females. So female calves as well will stay with their mothers and other related females for their lives, where the females are usually, the oldest cow usually leaves the herd. And as I mentioned, these guys are herbivores. They typically feed on short grasses that grow in light and alkaline soils and can be found in savanna grasslands and on plains. They often also associate with plain zebra, where they eat the upper, less nutritious canopy that explodes the lower, greener ones that the wildebeest prefer. And they actually can survive in the Kalahari Desert as well, as they attain enough water from melons and roots and tubers that allows them to survive. So let's talk about their breeding. Male wildebeest becomes sexually mature at about 2 years of age, and females can conceive 16 months after birth if they are nourished. And most females do not really start breeding until 2 or 3 years old, which coincides with the raining season. And the mating season, or rut, typically begins on the night of a full moon, where the testosterone in males peaks, and they will fight each other for females and have these elaborate displays, which is pretty interesting. Look at this wonderful little guy here. So the gestation period as well lasts about 8.5 months, and between 80 and 90% of the calves are born within a 3-week period, with females giving birth in the middle of the herd rather than alone, and typically in the middle of the day. And this allows the newborn to be steady before night falls and predators become more active. And calves generally weigh about 19 kilograms at birth and can usually stand on their own within a few minutes of birth, and to escape predation, they pretty much remain as close to their mothers as they can, and they typically suckle on their mother's teat for about the next year or so of their lives, with male calves leaving their mother about 8 months of age to form herds with other male juveniles. But in large female herds, 80% of them, of the offspring, will survive the first month, compared to the 50% rate in smaller herds. So bigger herds means more living babies. So as I mentioned, they live in places like Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, and they've been extinct in Malawi and have been reintroduced into Namibia, which is pretty interesting. These three African populations of wildebeest kind of take place in these big migrations. The quite famous ones are Serengeti, where they move across the plains and they follow the raining season to find more nutrients-rich grass, which is pretty interesting. It's kind of the really famous Serengeti migration as well. And in terms of their threats, these guys are often worried or get affected by deforestation. Diseases from cattle, such as sleeping sickness, can affect them as well. But luckily, there have been some effects on these guys. It seems they have recovered soon from some areas where they've managed to eradicate these diseases. And the total number of blue wildebeest in the wild is estimated to be about 1.5 million. And the population is considered stable generally. And though there has been, generally they are considered least concerned, the white bearded wildebeest, which is another subspecies, or species depending you ask. They've seen steep declines with only about 8,000 animals left, and this has been something that's been considered a serious concern. So in terms of their relationship with humans, they're one of the major herbivores in southern and eastern Africa, and they often bring tourists because of big game, and also people want to hunt them. Also, they have been often hunted for food as well, but now people a lot of time will hunt them for sport as well, which is pretty interesting. And yeah, really, really cool animal. Very famous for these big migrations and things like that. Really nice wildebeest. Jen, you did a wonderful job, and Leaf, you did a wonderful job as well. But next, we've got another mod by Nile Wildebeest. Last but most certainly not least, we have got the African Civet. So, really nice little guy here. So, let's have a look. So, the African Civet here is a large viverrid. So, they're more related to cats. These guys are native to sub-Saharan Africa, where they live through woodlands and forests as well. And they're typically considered nocturnal, so they sleep during the day and come out at night, and have these unique colorations that have like a cryptic pattern that allows to break their like camouflage, allows them to have camouflage, and it's almost like a raccoon almost. And one of the other distinctive features are kind of have these long crest down their back, and also they got like a raccoon like face here with the markings. And they're pretty generalist in terms of diet. They're omnivorous, so they feed on pretty much anything they can get their mouths around. So they'll feed on invertebrates, small vertebrates, eggs, carrion, and vegetable matters. And they're actually one of the few carnivores capable of eating toxin invertebrates such as millipedes and termites. And they are able to detect prey primarily by their smell and their sound rather than their sight, which is pretty interesting. So in terms of the characteristics, you can see they've got this coarse and fur, which has like this creamy to greyish colour with some white bits as well, which is really, really interesting. And they also have a dorsal crest that you can see down here that kind of makes them, they can erect it if they feel danger. And in terms of body size, they get to about head to body length of about 67 to 84 centimeters or 26 to 33 inches, with a 34 to 47 centimeter long tail of 13 to 19 inches. And the typically weight range is between 27 to 20 kilograms or 15 to 44 pounds, with females being generally smaller than the males. And they are the largest viverrid in Africa, with a shoulder height of about 40 centimeters or 16 inches. And also, both females and males have a perineal and anal gland, which is bigger in males. It allows them to spray things and mark areas of their territory, and also tell everyone, oh yeah, I'm ready to mate. So these guys, as I mentioned, typically sleep during the day in tall grasses, and then they occupy lots of different habitats such as savannas, forests, even rivers and stuff like that, where they will go out at night and typically feed. And they actually also deposit their feces in these latrines, often called civetrines, where these latrines have lots of like fruit seeds, exoskeletons, and clumps of grass as well. And this is believed to be used as a way to disperse seeds as well. So a lot of species will often, in these latrines, will use that nutrients deposited there to kind of grow up and get big. And these guys are typically solitary creatures where they use their perineal glands to mark their territories and their civetrines and all that. And in terms of feeding, they are omnivorous. They feed on rodents like pouch rats, cane rats as well, grass mice, lots of amphibians such as hallowebs, toads, spinning cobras, margids, also lots of fruits, berries, seeds, and lots of moths and invertebrates and things like that. A lot of things like that. They've also seem to be eating grass as well, but that may be linked to eating of snakes, amphibians. And I'm pretty sure we have a baby here. That's the baby. Let's have a look at the next one. Have a look at the little baby here as we talk about reproduction. So females are polyestrous, with mating lasting about 40 to 70 seconds. And in southern Africa, these guys will typically mate from October to November, and females will give birth in the rainy season between January and February. The average lifespan for a captive one's about 15 to 20 years, with females creating a nest in the dense vegetation, which is also commonly dug a hole by another animal, so it's like an aardvark or a porcupine or something, or a pangolin. Female African civets never give birth to 1 or 4 young, and the young are born in more advanced stages than a lot of most kind of carnivores. And they're actually covered in a small, dark, short fur, and they can crawl around at birth. And the young will leave the nest at about 18 days, but are still dependent on their mother's milk and protection for another 2 months of their lives. And in terms of threats, I believe they're considered least concern. Yes, they're quite common, but there's a lot of things such as hunting as well. In 2006, estimated about 10,000 civets were hunted in Nigeria, and another about 6,000 or 7,000 were killed in Cameroon. So that means they're considered a rare species, and they believe their local populations are going down because they're considered a common animal for bushmeat. And they've often worked, commonly hunted historically for their pineal glands, since they were able to create like this waxy stomach called civetone, which was used in many perfumes for hundreds of years. And they were either hunted alive or kept in small cages, which usually died within 3 weeks of capture because they were stressed. And it's been considered extracting this civetone is actually pretty cruel, and it's often criticized by animal rights groups saying, no, you can't do that, but I'm glad that it's not a very common thing anymore. These guys have clearly have made a good job of it. They're clearly happy and healthy, having a good sleep. But yeah, Nawali did a wonderful job with these guys here. And now we're on our last animal. I think this would be a great place to end the video. So obviously I'm going to thank everyone that made these mods: Jen, Noala, Leaf, Buffsu, all of you wonderful guys here, Ginger Toast as well, and Ian Bebo, who made the Mullets Crocodile. That's like your introduction. You did a wonderful job. So yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified about anything. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye bye.